But thank you again for coming along today and joining us for our monthly cybersecurity webinar. Today from Fortinet, we've got Stephen Jamieson, Senior Solutions Engineer. Thanks for coming along, Stephen.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, yeah, great. And we've got our very own Mike Gilroy-Scott, I Head Technology.
Good morning.
Morning. And myself, Mark Tyers, co-founder of Formation Tech. And it's a good time of year to have this sort of discussion. You know, the New Year's on us. There's an ever dizzying array of cyber issues and threats in the market. And really today we're going to talk about some of the themes we're seeing from our customers, the market more generally, and also how businesses are going about identifying issues, deciding where to start, what solutions, priorities and strategies to take, and how to get a handle on all this. If something resonates, please do feel free to message in this webinar. There's a chat function. We can ask the guys the questions if they're appropriate to what we're talking about. If not, you know, please reach out to your account contact and ask the question after the webinar. But hope you find it useful. As you've seen, some of the key topics today, you know, addressing the security gaps, you know, so gain clarity on the potential vulnerabilities. When you've got some clarity, how do you go about uncovering those? VPN performance, shadow IT, and reducing vendor sprawl. These are all interconnected components of the security landscape. I'm going to try and cover all those as much as we can in the next half an hour. Again, please do reach out should you want to have some more information or further discussions after the webinar. So to the first points, really, you know, what are we talking about when we talk about a security gap and what do you address first? Well, the common answer to where you address it first is what is the greatest impact that will be felt? Should it be breached? But more broadly, Mike, what are we talking about when we talk about gaps in the context of security?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone would immediately jump to, oh, it's a security gap or hole or whatever in your configuration. But I think more and more what we're seeing is the gap in the skills and the staffing to sort of maintain and manage security applications and setups, etc. Because what we're seeing in the market is a huge amount of vendor sprawl to, you know, rapidly plug holes. So there's a sort of trend to buy a new tool to secure certain items, and what that ends up in is you get a situation where some people have as much as, or on average, 30 security tools to maintain and manage. And then what you've got with that is that you're having to skill up you know, your staff on 30 tools. All right, and if you're having to look into 30 places to maintain your security posture, you've immediately got a problem, right? But no one's set out to create that problem. It was just a response to the change in the workplace and working practices. So, you know, it was the evolution of kind of moving things into data centers and then into the cloud, and then the proliferation of SaaS-based applications. So the security setups of yesteryear just don't apply. And as the business evolved and it grew and it changed its working practices, you know, new tools were being required to sort of extend out that security that used to just be a perimeter.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Mike. And I suppose, Stephen, to yourself, you know, talking about this rationalization of products, you know, Mike touched upon the change in working practices. Fortinet, how are they more generally, what strategically are they talking about when it comes to a more broader solution for this, you know, to address these both skills and multiplication of products?
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's put it into headlines. Really, is, you know, you've got different islands within your environment that you happen to secure, whether that's cloud, whether that's network, whether it's the users, and it's really trying to consolidate that so you, as much as possible, get that consistent feel to the users that they are secure no matter where they are. And overall, really looking to reduce the complexity of managing that on a day-to-day basis. But equally, it's you know, I mean, it's always been a case of reducing the risk that to the company, but I think the risk as a profile has extended way beyond IT. Now that's, you know, that's board level, that's you know, certainly director level of involvement in what is the risk that a company could face from the threats that are out there.
Yeah, because there was a time when strategically businesses may have said, well, by having multiple vendors, it spreads that risk, and you're not therefore exposed to that single business, that single approach. And I think with the multiple now different ways of working, different applications, different locations, what is a desired number of vendors, if it's even possible to sort of define that. But what do you see the businesses that have gone through this journey addressing this sort of issue? Where do they end up? How many businesses do they operating with?
Yeah, but I don't know you could put a number on it as such. But I suppose the key to it is that you don't end up with isolated islands of security that are not sharing information. So, you can have, of course, you're going to have different vendors within your environment. If they're able to share information that allows you to have a coordinated view and a coordinated way of managing the risk and the threats that are out there, that can only be a good thing.
And I guess in the context of where we do a lot of work, we do a lot of work in the cloud, and we do a lot of work standardizing the way in which security is placed across those different environments, from endpoint to office to cloud. We more often than not see a whole nother. We often see, for example, people use Azure AWS and using their standard security policies, which is necessarily fundamentally wrong with that. But Mike, what are you seeing people move to? Why? What are the challenges people are coming across there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's pretty rare to come across a business that isn't using some sort of cloud infrastructure to manage some of their workloads. So the immediate kind of, response is to use the security tools that are built into those platforms, which, as you pointed out, Mark, are probably sufficient to secure things. But it's another touch point for someone to manage, and it would be completely different to the traditional tools of firewalling that they would have been using in their offices. So again, a bit of a skill gap in terms of maintaining, managing those devices or applications, let's put it that way. So you've got a bit of a problem. You've got two touch points, you've got two levels of skills. You might need a different engineer who manages the AWS or Azure firewalls, right? And I think the messaging here is that the firewall vendors do offer cloud native firewalls for these kind of cloud environments, and you should treat your cloud workloads like you would treat any other office. And it has two benefits. One is it's the same tooling as you're used to maintaining and managing for your office. You can centralize the configuration, essentially extend out your security fabric to your cloud workloads, and then all of your security is talking to each other. You've got a centralized policy management. You get the visibility, the monitoring, the reporting across all of those workloads.
So a key word for me when you summarize it like that, Mike, is consistency. You get that consistency of look and feel and management and familiarity, so you're not having to learn two ways of doing things.
So going back to the more general topic here of the gap, and there's some businesses here will feel they've got that skills gap. Some people may be uncertain about where the gap exists within technology. They may well understand how the resource to actually manage. So the next topic here we've got to talk about is those hidden vulnerabilities. So whichever one of those two camps people fall into, there's always a bit of an uncertainty, a bit of an unknown, and there's different ways businesses are dealing with things. I mean, Mike, it's probably worth starting with you around some of the tools, some of the strategies people are employing today to help get ahead of that risk.
Absolutely. And I think, as brilliant as your cybersecurity teams are, right, they know that there's always going to be things which they've overlooked, missed, etc. Not because, they're not doing their jobs well. It's just that it's an extremely challenging task, and things always change. New software updates, etc., which might create their own vulnerabilities. So, what are the tools that you refer to? So, the most commonly and probably well-known tool is pen testing. It has its challenges. It's time-consuming. It can be costly. But what it will float up is all of the aspects that a malicious attacker will use to exploit your business. So it's a great tool to identify where you need to focus your attentions first. There are kind of ways to sort of mitigate some of that cost and time by using some of the newer automated penetration testing tools that are out there, because one of the benefits of that is you run it regularly as opposed to once a year or every 2 years or whenever your cadence is for that. And lastly, there is another tool, cyber threat assessment programs, which you can essentially drop in a tool which basically monitors all your traffic for up to a week or two, and will present to you all of the things that are already happening within your network. And it's surprisingly eye-opening, because as tight as your security may be, there might be some things in there that you weren't aware of, and it just gives you a checklist of things to tighten up your security posture.
Because we've seen automated pen testing now being carried out, as you say, rather than ticking a box for some compliance, it's actually genuinely been done on a consistent basis at a much reduced rate. And we're seeing acquisitive companies using it to pre-validate acquisitions they're making, equally to make sure the IT teams that say they're doing things in those acquisitions are actually doing them, and that more broader peace of mind. It feels like there's quite a big change from accessibility and cost, I suppose, Mike.
Absolutely. And, it's being, rather than something you have to do for the compliance, as you said, it's becoming a strategic tool to sort of maintain and update your security posture.
And Stephen, going onto the people part of this, there's a nice phrase you came up when we were chatting recently about, it's not just the people, it's process, the technology, and the people. Do you want to perhaps go and tell it a bit?
Yeah, I mean, to pull together the, I suppose, what you require to secure your environment. Technology on its own is lots of talk around automation and AI and all of those things, but ultimately you still need the people and the processes behind the technology to make it work effectively. And then that spreads across your entire environment of what those processes are and what the people are actually doing. And that's not just an IT function. More and more we're seeing pushing out testing to users with email campaigns to see whether they fall for phishing. And I know that we live and breathe technology every day, Fortinet, but we do our own campaigns, and I've seen people fall for the most simple phishing campaigns that we push out there. So it's really an education piece for people. It's understanding where the skills are, where people would need to address the training, but then look at how that is then applied across the IT function.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we've seen a lot of people adopting that, again, quite low cost, Mike. It's quite scalable. It's one of those gaps. I mean, the people component for security is still one of the biggest, most simple ways of accessing a business, it seems.
Absolutely. It's quite commonly referred to as the human firewall, as it were, because why hack something when you can just send a well-crafted email into people to get them to do your work for you? It is still one of the biggest initial points of breaches for most organizations. So it is becoming a challenge, and whilst a lot of compliance will require regular training of your staff, I think the number of businesses who are actually really doing it and taking it seriously and enforcing it is probably not as high as it should be. And I think general awareness of these things is improving, but regular, structured, simple training that would just give people all the basics and the tools to kind of protect your business shouldn't be overlooked in your security.
There's a couple of platforms that we've used. We can probably share out at the end of this session. Sorry, Steve, you're about to.
I was just going to say that there was a report recently from Google around the cloud. This was particularly for the cloud environment. They believe that 95% of breaches will start not with someone doing something malicious, but by somebody making a mistake. So they've left a workload open, or permissions are not what they should be. And that's not anybody, doing something wrong. Well, they are doing something wrong, but not doing it intentionally, and then someone then takes advantage of it. So it is having the set of tools to be able to spot that type of thing as well, which is a change in how things have traditionally been.
Yeah, and it leads quite nicely onto the next topic, VPN performance. Now, you say VPN performance, you think of quality, you think of dropping out at home and not being able to get through to applications, but actually we're talking about a sort of much broader issue, and there's not a lot going on in that remote access world. I suppose we're really leaning towards zero trust networking elements of access. And Mike, do you want to perhaps touch on that a little bit more detail? And we're going to avoid as many acronyms as we can here, but try to explain.
We'll do our best. It's going to get a bit acronym soup in these next two sections, but we'll try and keep it fairly top level. But essentially, VPN is still a thing. People still use it. They have private workloads which they operate out of their office, in a data center, or in the cloud. And so you still need that VPN, but also, you know, a lot of the traffic that comes through their VPNs, you know, it's quite difficult to manage, and you want to make that VPN as secure as possible. And I think traditional VPN is just not fit for purpose anymore. It's overly permissive. It's got a single point of authentication. Once you're on, you're on. And once you're on that connection, you've got too much access to the networks you're connecting to. So what we're seeing is this move towards a zero trust architecture here. And zero trust is very simply never trust, always verify. So we get this concept that we're continuously evaluating you as a user, the device you're connecting to from, where you're connecting from, when you're connecting from, and is there anything on your device that means you are allowed to access that? Are you part of the HR department, for example? So all of those things can be brought into your VPN connectivity, and this is what we mean by zero trust networking, is that we're looking at all of those parameters all of the time, and if any of those things come out of sync, you lose access immediately. Yeah, whereas traditionally before you'd have to tear down the VPN manually, etc., to make that sort of thing happen.
So if someone is getting a compromised password, compromised access, if it's not the right device, the right software level, do you want to explain posture in a little more detail? It's quite a simple, complex concept, but it equally takes a bit of explaining.
It does. So the posture is, it's kind of who you are, what you're connecting from, what's the status of that device. Have you got antivirus? Have you got a firewall? Do you have any vulnerabilities on that machine, for example, that could be exploited? So all of those parameters create the posture, and with very simple configuration, you can set up a set of rules that says, if all of these things are checked, you're allowed. It's like a conditional access, essentially, but it's continuously checking. It's not just at the point of entry, the time you boot up your laptop. It's continuous. And if any of those things change, so your antivirus gets switched off, your file gets turned off, which might happen because you've got some malicious application on your device that's trying to do something nefarious, it'll just switch off your access to that critical data of a business. So it gives you that very granular control over who's accessing what, when, and from what device.
We'll talk about user experience later on, but there is a component of this that's perhaps worth talking about. We have a question here though. So what are the best recommendations for closing security gaps with third-party access to internal organizational resources? Is that one for you, Mike, to start with?
Yeah. So for third-party access to internal organization resources. So is this, I assume this is applications that you're running within the organization. So, or is it you might have Chinese world organizations? So, I think what you have to establish is what are your applications, what are your workloads, and then who needs access to that. Okay, and then with zero trust access, you can, and this could be the best thing about this is it works internally as well as externally, because it's not just a VPN in to gain access to things. You can actually create this zero trust policy inside of your trusted networks. So everything effectively becomes an untrusted network, and who has access to what within your environment is dictated by who you are, what department you're in, what device you're accessing it, and to a certain extent whether you're inside or outside the network, because you could be a bit more permissive if you're in the network and less permissive when you're outside of the network. So the best practice is to always figure out what people need access to. Do you have the right people who've got access to that? And then create a policy based around that and deploy zero trust around that.
Fantastic. So I'm going to throw another acronym in here we'll talk about in a minute, SASE, and I'll leave one of you guys to explain what that's all about. But this next topic is shadow IT, and it all kind of, obviously in the context of what we're talking about, it's just another component of probably human people, doing things to the network that the IT team or the business doesn't really know about. So I guess in the context of today, that risk alongside what we've already been talking about. Do you want to perhaps explain what SASE is in sort of lay terms, and explain maybe how this shadow IT application is a part of that, and how businesses are addressing that?
Yeah, sure. So it is one of those phrases that you're probably hearing more and more, but it's made up of a number of components. It is giving the users secure internet access, independent of where they are, so whether they're a home worker or whether they are office-based. It's giving secure private access to corporate applications, again, independent of where they are hosted. And then the final element of it is giving secure access to SaaS-based applications, so those based in the cloud. So bringing all of those together, there's a number of components that you would need to do that, both connectivity and security piece, and that is basically a framework of what we've pulled together under the Secure Access Service Edge SASE framework. It's a number of different technologies behind that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, being close to the market and in the cybersecurity world, it's been talked about for quite a long time, and it's been relatively mature for a period as well. But I think we're seeing more businesses adopting this. I mean, Mike, from a theme of standardization of security and reporting and having sort of less vendors. Have you got some examples perhaps to talk about in that respect?
Yeah, and I think it ties in very much with, you know, people wanting to achieve a number of things which Stephen's just alluded to. And the great thing about this is it's bringing all of those things that most businesses are trying to secure, the endpoints, remote access, all of these things, and you're just buying one tool that will essentially do it all and give you one point of management for it, and, you know, visibility across your estate, while still maintaining kind of secure private access, which is your workloads in the cloud or data centers, etc. And one of the other benefits of it is the old adage that the more security you have, the more cumbersome it becomes for the users. But what's really great about this technology is it's almost completely transparent to the user. They're not having to do anything differently. They're not having to think, oh, I'm accessing that application, I need to connect to this VPN or change to get to another application. It's doing all of that seamlessly and intelligently in the background for the user. So it improves productivity as well. The performance is increased because it doesn't matter where they are. If they've got access to the internet, they can get to these applications. It's not having to backhaul to a data center in Frankfurt to then break out through your local firewalls. This is all done in your local POP. So you're applying security in the cloud and then allowing or disallowing based on the policies that you create. Like, here are a list of our approved SaaS applications. You're trying to get to something else, you can't, right? Because you're going through that secure web gateway, which is preventing you from accessing Dropbox, for example, or an unsanctioned application. So you can control of that, and you get visibility and all the logging that goes with it. So you just get way more control. So I think, you know, a single tool can solve a lot of the individual challenges that people are experiencing.
And Stephen, it's fair to say that this sort of security framework can be accessed either by the endpoint or through the wireless access point. So because it's effectively going through FortiCloud. Do you want to perhaps touch upon those different ways in which one can use this technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. It is giving you the as a user, again, as Mike rightly says, it's invisible. But what you're basically getting is secure access independently of where you are, what you're using to access applications, what location you're in. As long as you're within the policy that has been created, you will get access. And you know, that's a significant improvement on the way that it was previously with VPN. I mean, I'll use an example of what, it's quite an extreme example, but it's a real one. One of my customers basically goes to events around different parts of the world, put in a network, and then they want to get access back to their corporate environment. And then 5 days later, they tear that down and go off to the next location. Trying to get access to the corporate applications in all those multiple locations was really difficult for them when they are remote. They've deployed SASE, and now they easily get access because they're not having to rely on backhauling back through using VPNs to get back to their corporate applications.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got another question here, which is quite appropriate. So, what is the best way of validating if a phishing campaign has been a success? We started implementing a phishing simulation. It feels strange to try and purposely trick employees, although rationally understand that that's where the benefit is.
Yeah, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, this is a
Yeah,
topic
I know
quite
Stephen's got a
so.
great anecdote for this, so you can follow up with this. But for me, I think for a phishing simulation to be successful, there's two components to it. It's the training you give your staff first before you deliver the phishing simulation. I'm a real firm believer in this, because some people will think, oh, I know, I'm just going to do the phishing simulation to see how bad the situation is now. But actually, interestingly, some of the tools that we use actually provide the training and the report phishing buttons to the users, show them how to use it, test them on some, give them a quiz about, here's 10 emails, you tell me which ones are phishing and which ones are legitimate, right? So actually educating first, then doing the phishing simulation, because they know what they're looking for. They've got a phishing button which will give you the metrics and the stats to see if they're getting it right or wrong. So having a tool that can measure that kind of employee performance. So it's not about tricking your staff, it's about preparing them, right? So just remember what the purpose of this is to make them, rightfully suspicious of stuff. And even if they get it wrong, right, you can then either just say, look, it's better you're overcautious than undercautious. So I think, just maybe rethink how you're approaching that phishing simulation and what you're actually trying to achieve. It's not to catch your staff out, it's to make sure that if they do accidentally click on something, that you have a follow-up training exercise that's plumbed down to them, say, watch this 2-minute video, this will refresh your memory. And then, with all simulations, just continuous evaluation, just continue, right? Don't just stop, don't just do one round, do multiple rounds. Yeah. So you can just keep track of what's going on there.
Thank you, Mike. Stephen, would you like to touch on that analogy?
Echo exactly what Mike's just said. It is exactly that. It is, I suppose, it's consistency, measuring it as well. To see what are the results from when you first launch a campaign to 6 months later when you've done your third or your fourth, to see whether it's improving. People that have clicked through, again, it's not a punishment thing, but make sure when we've done it. And the anecdote Mike was referring to, so we actually did one around Christmas time saying that Fortinet was giving everybody a free turkey. You would be amazed how many people clicked on that thinking they were going to get a nice fresh turkey, but it wasn't. It was a campaign. And again, the consequence was people then had to go off and do a refresher of the email security training. So I think that would be that's a good answer from Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. And there's another question actually here. Probably one for you, Stephen, is with regards to shadow IT, how do you restrict employers from registering subscriptions with cloud-hosted platforms such as PDF editing cloud services? This could have confidential information that is now being stored, processed by a third party. Would this fall under DLP, and how can one stop it?
It's again, once you start looking into what applications you do have, what applications people have on their laptops, what people are accessing using tools like SASE, you can get a much better viewpoint of what is out there. But then I suppose taking it to another level, that would be something like DLP to be able to prevent data coming out of your network. Certainly something we've got a solution for. It's a combination of things. I think the SASE piece is more network level. It does have application inputs, but being able to then control where that application is going, then that's something like a DLP.
Yeah, look, if you need some further discussion on that, very happy to pick this up after the webinar and go into it in more detail to understand the context. We're coming to the end of the session actually, and by all means, if anyone has any more questions, please do fire them across. Equally, pick up your account contacts. I'm sure they'll be in touch with you as well. Always like to finish these webinars with like what's next. We're at the start of 2025 now. It'll be really interesting to see what we're talking about at the end of this, looking into 2026. So I guess starting with you first, Mike. What are big themes this year? We're not even mentioning the AI yet, and I'm not suggesting I'm going to lead you down that path, but that's quite unique in any webinar today in 2025, not to mention that. I'm quite proud that we've managed that, in fact. But for 2025 onwards, what are we going to be talking about for 2026? What are the things people are looking out for?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned AI, and I'll just squeeze this in very quickly. We're very interested in it from a secure network providers. Knowing what's out there and what you need to secure. 0 days are very prominent, and your reaction time to those is extremely important. And we've developed an AI tool that will scrape the internet for known exploitations and vulnerabilities, and we will compare it to a database of platforms and services we look after our clients. And if we get any matches, we will automatically raise tickets on that, so we can proactively remediate those sort of situations. We're going to extend it out to actually products and services we don't currently look after, but we will inform our customers that they might have something that needs looking at for them. So we're going to be offering that service to our customers in early 2025. More on topic with the subject of the webinar. I think with the advent of SASE and this kind of tunneling your traffic through the Fortinet Cloud with FortiSASE product is the ability to get increased and enhanced visibility on digital experience monitoring. So this is the ability to see how well your applications are performing, right? So you will actually see, historic metrics on kind of application performance. If you've got secure private workloads, you can see how well they're performing over certain carriers and all those sorts of things. Single visibility across your network is what it's going to bring you. And then lastly, because you're tunneling through the Forti Cloud, the ability to use remote browser isolation, which is if you've got particularly users who are not particularly great about adding weird Chrome extensions and things like that, you can actually stream browser sessions. So actually the session is being delivered to the cloud, a bit like remote desktop, but then the session is streamed in a restricted way down to the users as well.
Stephen, yourself, 2025 onwards?
Yeah, I think, obviously the evolution of cybersecurity has moved dramatically, probably accelerated massively during the pandemic. And what we're seeing more and more of is moving away from network-based security to user-centric, the user experience, some of the stuff that Mike's just alluded to. And then taking that on, I suppose, a step further is enhancements in the areas of cloud security and DLP. Making that not just something that you tick a box for, but making that easier to identify the threats and then being able to do something about them, so protect yourself from the threats that are out there. So I think all of those things are certainly conversations that we're hearing more and more.
Fantastic. Well, we are at the end of the session. So as I said, please do reach out. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
And equally, Mike. So yes, we run these quite regularly on different topics. We'll be sure to reach out for you should you wish to join another one. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you joining today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.